Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. Today, we're going to read John Updike's short story, A&P. A&P by John Updike. In walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits. I'm in the third checkout slot with my back to the door, so I don't see them until they're over by the bread. The one that caught my eye first was the one in the plaid green two-piece. She was a chunky kid with a good tan and a sweet, broad, soft-looking can with those two crescents of white just under it, where the sun never seems to hit, at the top of the backs of her legs. I stood there with my hand on a box of Hi-Ho crackers trying to remember if I rang it up or not. I ring it up again, and the customer starts giving me hell. She's one of those cash register watchers. A witch about 50 with rouge on her cheekbones with no eyebrows, and I know it made her day to trip me up. She'd been watching cash registers for 50 years and probably never seen a mistake before. By the time I got her feathers smoothed and her goodies into a bag, she gives me a little snort in passing. If she'd been born at the right time, they would have burned her over in Salem. By the time I get her on her way, the girls had circled around the bread and were coming back without a pushcart, back my way along the counters, in the aisle between the checkouts and the special bins. They didn't even have shoes on. There was this chunky one with the two-piece. It was bright green, and the seams on the bra were still sharp, and her belly was still pretty pale, so I guess she just got it, the suit. There was this one, the one with those chubby berry faces, the lips all bunched together under her nose, this one, and a tall one, with black hair that hadn't quite frizzed right, and one of them sunburns right across under her eyes, and a chin that was too long. You know, the kind of girl that other girls think is striking and attractive, but never quite makes it, as they very well know, which is why they like her so much. And then the third one. That wasn't quite so tall. She was the queen. She kind of led them, the other two, peeking around and making their shoulders round. She didn't look around, not this queen. She just walked straight on slowly, on these long, wide prima donna legs. She came down a little hard on her heels, as if she didn't walk in her bare feet that much, putting down her heels and then letting the weight move along her toes as if she was testing the floor with every step, putting a little deliberate extra action into it. You never know for sure how girls' minds work. Do you really think it's a mind in there or just a little buzz like a bee in a glass jar? But you got the idea that she had talked the other two into coming in here with her, and now she was just showing them how to do it, how to walk slow and hold yourself straight. She had on a kind of dirty pink beige, maybe, I don't know, bathing suit with a little nubble all over it. And what got me, the straps were down. They were off her shoulders, looped around loose the cool tops of her arms. And I guess as a result, the suit had slipped a little on her. So all around the top of the cloth, there was this shining rim. If it hadn't have been there, you wouldn't have known that there could have been anything, wider than those shoulders. With the straps pushed off, there was nothing between the top of the suit and the top of her head except just her. This clean, bare plane on the top of her chest down from the shoulder bones, like a dented sheet of metal tilted in the light. I mean, it was more than pretty. She had a sort of a oaky hair that the sun and the salt had bleached, done up in a bun that was unraveling, and a kind of a prim face. Walking into the A&P with your straps down, I suppose that's the only kind of face you can have. She held her head so high, her neck coming out of those white shoulders, it looked kind of stretched, but I didn't mind. The longer her neck was, the more of her there was. She must have felt in the corner of her eye me and over my shoulder Stokesy in the second slot watching, but she didn't tip. Not this queen. She kept her eyes moving across the racks and stopped turned around so slow it made my stomach rub the inside of my apron, and she buzzed to the other two, who kind of huddled against her for relief. And then they all three of them went up the cat and dog food, breakfast, cereal, macaroni, rice, raisins, seasoning, spread, spaghetti, soft drinks, crackers, and cookies aisle. From the third slot, I looked straight up this aisle to the meat counter, and I watched them all the way. The fat one with the tan sort of fumbled with the cookies, but on second thought, she put the package back. The sheep were pushing their carts down the aisle. The girls were walking against the usual traffic. Not that we have one-way signs or anything. Were pretty hilarious. You could see them. When Queenie's white shoulders dawned on them, they kind of jerk, hop, or hiccup. But their eyes snapped back to their baskets, and on they pushed. I bet you can set off dynamite at an A&P, and the people would, by and large, keep reaching and checking oatmeal off their lists and muttering, "Let me see. There was a third thing. It began with A. Asparagus? No. Ah, yes, applesauce," or whatever it is they do mutter. But there was no doubt that this jiggled them. A few house slaves and pin curls even looked around after pushing their carts past to make sure that what they had seen was correct. You know, it's one thing to have a girl in a bathing suit down on the beach where, with the glare, nobody can look at each other much anyway. And another thing in the cool of the A&P under the fluorescent lights against all those stacked packages with her feet paddling along, naked over our checkerboard green and cream rubber tile floor. "Oh, Daddy," Stokesy said beside me, "I feel so faint." "Darling," I said, "hold me tight." Stokesy's married, with 2 babies chalked up to his fuselage already. But as far as I can tell, that's the only difference. He's 22, and I was 19 this April. "Is it done?" he asked, the responsible married man finding his voice. I forgot to say that he thinks he's going to be the manager some sunny day, maybe in 1990, when it's called the Great Alexandrov and Petrovsky Tea Company or something. What he meant was that our town is 5 miles from the beach, with a big summer colony out on the point, but we're right in the middle of the town. And the women generally put on a shirt or shorts or something before they get out of the car into the street. And anyway, these are usually women with 6 children and varicose veins mapping their legs, and nobody, including them, could care less. But as I say, we're right in the middle of town, and you can stand at our front door and you can see 2 banks, the Congregational Church, the newspaper store, and 3 real estate offices, and about 27 old freeloaders tearing up Central Street because the sewer broke again. It's not like we're on the Cape. We're north of Boston, and there's people in this town that haven't seen the ocean for 20 years. The girls had reached the meat counter and were asking McMahon something, and he pointed, and they shuffled out of sight behind the pyramid of Diet Delight peaches. All that was left for us to see was old McMahon patting his mouth, looking after them, sizing up their joints. Poor kids. I began to feel sorry for them. They couldn't help it. Now here comes the sad part of the story, or at least my family says it's sad, but I don't think it's so sad myself. The store's pretty empty, it being Thursday afternoon, so there's nothing much to do except lean on the register and wait for the girls to show up again. The whole store was like a pinball machine, and I didn't know which tunnel they'd come out of. After a while, they come down out of the far aisle down around the light bulbs, records at discount of the Caribbean 6 and Tony Martin Sings, or some such gunk you wonder why they waste the wax on. 6 packs of candy bars, plastic toys done up in cellophane that fall apart when a kid looks at them. And around they come. Queenie still leading the way and holding a little gray jar in her hand. Slots 3 through 7 are unmanned, and I could see her wandering between Stokes and me. But Stokesy, with his usual luck, draws an old party in baggy gray pants who stumbles up with 4 giant cans of pineapple juice. What do these bums do with that pineapple juice? I've often asked myself. So the girls come to me. Queenie puts down the jar, and I take it into my fingers, icy cold. Kingfish Fancy Herring Snacks in pure sour cream, 49 cents. Now her hands are empty. There's not a ring or a bracelet, bare as God made them, and I wonder where's the money coming from. Still, with that prim look, she lifts a folded dollar bill out of the hollow at the center of her nubbled pink top. The jar went heavy in my hand. Really? I thought that was so cute. And then everybody's luck begins to run out. L'Engle comes in from haggling with a truck full of cabbages on the lot and is about to scuttle in the door marked manager, behind which he hides all day, when the girls touch his eye. L'Engle's pretty dreary. He teaches Sunday school and the rest, but he doesn't miss much. He comes over and says, "Girls, this isn't the beach." Queenie blushes, though maybe it's just a brush of sunburn I was noticing for the first time, now that she was so close. "My mother asked me to pick up a jar of herring snacks." Her voice kind of startled me. You know, the way voices do when you see the people first coming out so flat and dumb. It kind of Tony, too, the way it tickled over pickup and snacks. All of a sudden, I slid right down her voice into her living room, and her father and the other men were standing around in ice cream coats and bow ties, and the women were in sandals picking up herring snacks on toothpicks off of a big glass plate, and they were all holding drinks the color of water with olives and sprigs of mint in them. When my parents have somebody over, they get lemonade. And if it's a real racy affair, they get Schlitz in tall glasses with, they'll do it every time, cartoons stenciled on. "That's all right," L'Engle said, "but this isn't the beach." His repeating this struck me as funny, as if it had just occurred to him. And he had been thinking all these years that the A&P was a great big dune and he was the head lifeguard. He didn't like my smiling. As I said, he doesn't miss much, but he concentrates on giving the girls that sad Sunday school superintendent stare. Queenie's blush is no sunburn now, and the plump one in plaid that I like better from the back, a really sweet can, she pipes up, "We weren't doing any shopping. We just came in for one thing." "That makes no difference," L'Engle tells her. And I could see the way that her eyes went, that she hadn't noticed, that he hadn't noticed that she was wearing a two-piece before. "We want you decently dressed when you come in here." "We are decent," Queenie says suddenly, her lower lip pushing, getting sore now that she remembers her place, a place from which the crowd that runs the A&P must look pretty crummy. Fancy Herring Snacks flashed in her very blue eyes. "Girls, I don't want to argue with you. After this, come in here with your shoulders covered. It's our policy." He turns his back. That's policy for you. Policy is what the kingpins want. What the others want is juvenile delinquency. All of this while the customers have been showing up with their carts, but you know sheep. Seeing a scene, they all had bunched up on Stokesy, who shook a paper bag as gently as peeling a peach, not wanting to miss a word. I could feel in the silence everybody getting nervous, most of all L'Engle, who asks me, "Sammy, have you rung their purchase?" I thought and said no, but it wasn't about that I was thinking. I go through the punches, 4, 9, gross, tot. You know, it's more complicated than you'd think, and after you do it often enough, it begins to make a little song that you beat words to. In my case, hello, bing, there you go. Happy, peep, boop, splat. And the splat, the drawer comes flying out. I uncrease the bill tenderly, as you may imagine, it just having come from between the two smoothest scoops of vanilla I had ever known were there, and I pass a half and a penny into her narrow pink palm and nestle the herrings in a bag, twist its neck, and hand it over, all the time thinking. The girls, and who would blame them, are in a hurry to get out. So I say, I quit to Langle, quick enough for them to hear and hoping that they'll stop and watch me, their unsuspected hero. But they keep right on going into the electric eye. The door flies open and they flicker across the lot to their car. Queenie, Plaid, and big, tall Goonie. Not that as raw material she was so bad. Leaving me with Langle and a kink in his eyebrow. Did you say something, Sammy? I said I quit. I thought you did. You didn't have to embarrass them. It was they who were embarrassing us. I started to say something, but it came out fiddly-doo. It's a saying of my grandmother's, and I know she would have been pleased. I don't think you know what you're doing, Langle said. I know you don't, I said, but I do. I pulled the bow tie, the back, and my apron and started shrugging it off my shoulders. A couple of customers that had been heading for my slot began to knock against each other like scared pigs in a chute. Langle sighs and begins to look very patient and old and gray. And he's been a friend of my parents for years. Sammy, you don't want to do this to your mom and dad, he tells me. And it's true, I don't. But it seems to me that once you begin a gesture, it's fatal not to go through with it. So I fold up the apron Sammy stitched in red on the pocket and put it on the counter, and I drop the bow tie on top of it. The bow tie is theirs if you've ever wondered. You'll feel this for the rest of your life, Langle says, and I know that's true. But remembering how he made that pretty girl blush makes me so scrunchy inside. I punch the no sale tab, and the machine whirs people, and the drawer splats out. One advantage of this scene taking place in the summer is I can follow this up with a clean exit. There's no fumbling around getting your coat, galoshes, and I just saunter into the electric eye in my white shirt that my mother ironed the night before, and the door heaves itself open, and outside the sunshine is skating around on the asphalt. I look around for my girls, but they're gone, of course. There wasn't anybody but some young married screaming with her children about some candy that they didn't get by the door of the powder blue Falcon station wagon. Looking back in the big windows over the bags of peat moss and aluminum lawn furniture stacked on the pavement, I could see Langle in my place in the slot, checking the sheep through. His face was dark, gray, and his back was stiff, as if he'd just had an injection of iron. And my stomach kind of fell, as I felt how hard the world was going to be to me hereafter. This is Jimmy. You've been reading with Jimmy. That was John Updike's A&P story. Be sure to read the analysis and the interpretation after this. And thank you so much for showing up. If you have any emails, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Look forward to hearing you and seeing you in the next episodes. Not of A&P, of course, something else. Thanks for listening.